Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week we take a look at the highest grossing R-rated opening weekend ever. I mean, millions of records shattered. Not millions, but obviously a lot, and that's Deadpool. And we're also going to take a look at the Zoolander sequel, about 15 years in the making, and a female-centered comedy, How to Be Single, and as well, the final acting-nominated film that we have not covered on the show, and that's 45 Years, Charlotte Rampling, up for a Best Actress nomination for that. Joe, let's start with you. Usually the comic book guy, but not typically a fan of Deadpool, as you've mentioned on this show. So let's hear about the new Deadpool film.
Deadpool is the newest addition to the X-Men franchise, officially, with all the meta humor and wisecracks of the title character that you'd expect. Ryan Reynolds stars as Deadpool, obviously. In Deadpool, he basically hunts down the man who subjected him to experiments that left him with an accelerated healing factor and a very scarred physical appearance. On the way, his girlfriend is put in danger, and he even receives help from some other Marvel characters. Now, as you mentioned, Dan, I'm really not much of a Deadpool fan. Not that I really have a great hatred for the character or anything. I'm just not a huge fan of him. I think he's kind of become more of a gag character and less of an actual character, but that's one reason why a lot of people like him. But in terms of adapting a comic book character and making it legitimately something real for the fans that they can enjoy and being true to the character while still being accessible to people that might not necessarily know as much about the character, I think this is probably the best example of how to do a comic book movie. Because it's, in all honesty, just for something so true to the source material, being completely in the spirit and still not really sabotaging anything and making it work. I mean, I can't think of a better example. Any other movie I can think of, they might be great adaptations, but they might still be radically different in some way. For instance, the Dark Knight films, highly rated by everyone, but very, very different. You could argue there are some significant alterations from the traditional standard Batman, but that's neither here nor there. Deadpool is Deadpool in his movie. There is a lot of great humor. I found myself laughing a lot. I was enjoying all the way through. Reynolds does a great job with the performance. I think everyone kind of knew he was sort of destined for this, and he's really going all into it. I think
second time playing the role as well, which is mentioned a few times in the movie.
So many references, callbacks. A lot of fun is had with this, and you'll know right away that this is a Deadpool movie, and it's pretty awesome actually. There's a lot of fun. The action's pretty good. It flows by so fast, it's kind of hard to be bored with it at the very least. I think if you're not on board with it, you're not going to like it, but then why are you seeing it? It's kind of one of those things. The one minor nitpick I could think of was that this movie is so awesome that the story really isn't quite up to that level. But the story is simple, and it works enough as an origin story to keep everything else intact as a vehicle for the jokes, which is what Deadpool is, and everyone knows that. So I can't really say that's a major negative. Hopefully the sequel will amp up the ridiculousness of the story to match the comedy. But overall, I was very, very happy with it, even not as a Deadpool fan.
Well, Justin, you are more of a Deadpool fan. So, what were your initial thoughts on it?
I mean, passively at best, but definitely, I would say...
More than Joe, I guess.
More than Joe, definitely. I guess from what I've read of the character, he very much ranges from writer to writer. At worst, he is basically a gag character. At best, he's sort of the Marvel equivalent of Jack Sparrow. Doing a bunch of crazy, random, wacky things, but often you can find method to the madness. And the movie much more leans towards the latter, I think, for this one. And it certainly helps that Reynolds is completely committed to the role, trying to do everything to give the character life and dramatic contrast to X-Men Origins Wolverine, which is a nightmare for many different reasons. But I agree with you to some extent, Joe. I think the story is the weakest aspect, and I think the humor is very rapid fire, and because of that, only, I want to say about half of it hits. I felt like every time I was starting to get invested in the story, they sort of decided to take these giant jumps back, and we'll spend 20 minutes trying to set up other aspects to sort of build context as to why everything's going on the way it is. And I just found myself sort of losing interest in those sections, waiting for us to get back into the main story.
Are you talking about the flashback sequences and stuff?
More or less, yeah. Like,
It's interesting you say that because one of the things I didn't really mention, but one thing I did like is that I do like it when Deadpool has those dramatic moments in the comics when he's a little more serious. And I liked some of the more serious moments they had. Admittedly, there weren't too many, but there were one or two where he stops being humorous and things are really getting serious. And I did think there was enough of a core there. They could have probably expanded on it, but I thought those were okay.
I actually really liked the structure of the film. I liked that it isn't your basic origin story where we go chronologically and, okay, here's how he becomes Deadpool for the first 40 minutes of the movie, and then the last hour is the fight and the villain and everything else. I really liked that it comes right out of the gate with a cool action sequence, and then, sort of goes back and forth between the Wade Wilson love story and the Deadpool action fighting kind of also love story sometimes sort of thing.
for me, it just was like we spent so much time building up that we only get like 10, 15 minutes before we jump back to another large portion. It was one of the weakest aspects of when I first discovered what the story for this was actually going to be, and just thought to myself, this is a lot of fun, but I'm also finding myself realizing we're probably a third of the way into the movie before there's anything resembling a story here. And it really is a noticeable flaw. I find it hilarious, though, that this is quite possibly the most romantic movie that came out on Valentine's Day weekend, but...
It is a love story, I guess, but it's also a lot of other things.
It is.
I do agree the story is definitely... I don't know if I'd describe it as being weak, because I think it does what it's supposed to do.
It's weak.
I think you could describe it as weak, but like I said, that's not what this movie is really about. This movie is about bringing the character to life, and the character, as he's popularly known for most people, is pretty much all gag, which people like, and I think that this movie was about 90% gag, 10% story. I think people were pretty satisfied with it, and I understand that. And like I said, I hope the sequel would up that with a bigger comic book story, which it seems like they might do. But for the introduction, I think as purely this metaphysical comedy they were going for, I thought it was fine.
Well, I mean, looking at it as a representation of Deadpool as a counterpoint to these serious, over-the-top storylines, and sort of poking fun of that and saying, okay, look, this can just be fun entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'll get your money's worth. But in terms of actually, like, setting up the characters as big impetus for things to come, I'm not entirely sure if I'm feeling the 20th Century Fox Marvel Expanded Universe. I'll be honest. I like that there are callbacks, but I'll be honest. I feel like the more interconnected this gets, the more awkward it's going to get. And I don't think Deadpool is like the one that should be tying it all together.
Well, I think once again they're trying to model it a little bit more after Marvel with having more fun, and I think that that's certainly something that they've succeeded with this movie in particular. I mean, I think it definitely has broken some conventions, which I do like.
But if you think about the recent Fox entries, okay, Fantastic Four was zero fun. And what is the one scene that everybody can agree is probably the best scene of Days of Future Past? Quicksilver. Comedic. So I get it. I mean, I can appreciate that they're doing that.
The comedy aspect isn't what worries me about that.
So you think it's just you don't think he's a good linchpin for everything?
Well, I mean, I feel like they're trying to turn Deadpool basically into what Iron Man was in 2008. Like, hey, look, this is a standalone story, but guess what? Bigger things are coming.
Well, I don't know if Deadpool's the kind of character that can stand for that, because like I said, as most of his comics attest, which is why he hasn't had many long-running series, he's mostly a gag character. So yeah, I think he's successful, but that's why there aren't too many long-running storylines, which is why, I'm not going to say anything, but there'll be another character with him he's usually partnered with that is centered more in serious storylines, which could segue into other things relating to Days of Future Past, which might solve a problem I have issues with the upcoming movie, but neither here nor there. But I do like the fact that could be a possibility. I think in terms of breaking new ground with the character and setting up things plot-wise, I can see where you're coming from, Justin, but once again, this is a movie pretty much made for Deadpool fans. I think they know who the character is and what he's about.
Yeah, but they'd probably love it regardless of...
No, they were very careful about delivering a product to make them happy, which I think is the key.
Because after Origins Wolverine, they kind of had to.
And I guess that's the main point I'm trying to make, is I think, unlike any other comic book movie, this one put so much time and energy to make the fans happy. And I feel like that's true, you know?
Well, I think, judging by the box office numbers, I think it made a lot more people happy than just Deadpool fans. I never heard of Deadpool until the Origins movie years ago, and still didn't really care anything about the character. And to be honest, I was very skeptical about this because I didn't like the promotional lead up to it. I thought they were trying way too hard, and the movie is more, I don't know, authentic, and I think that's probably Ryan Reynolds' own stamp on it. Like the Super Bowl ad, I thought was really funny.
Oh, it was.
Because that was, Ryan Reynolds doing Deadpool. But like the marketing campaign, which I'm sure he had nothing to do with, I just thought they were trying too hard to be like edgy. Like the one poster where he's, cocking the gun down by his privates. We get it, you're 5. But like Ryan Reynolds added this genuine, like, smart ass, kind of thing to it, and he made it his own that I really appreciated. I thought this movie was hysterical.
Well, that's because he was good casting and he knows the character really well.
Well, and I also appreciated all of the little Easter eggs they threw in, and not even the obvious ones. There's a lot of like Ryan Reynolds specific things they threw in. Like at one point he's trapped in like a hyperbaric chamber type of thing, and he only has a certain item to get him out, and it reminded me of another movie where he was trapped in a very confined space and used a similar item. Just things like that where, I mean, they really, really put a lot of energy into making this a smart comedy.
Things you could get. A lot of references for fans of not just the comics, but of the X-Men movies and of Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It was all-inclusive in that sense. So there's something for everybody here, which is why I think that maybe not all the jokes hit for you, but I feel like there's a joke for everyone that saw the movie.
Oh, no, there's humor to be had, but I don't think it's consistent, is my main concern.
It's all over the place, but I laughed at most of it, so I can't really say it was too bad for me.
I can't say it was quite 50-50, Justin. I think it was definitely a higher ratio than that, but I do agree that sometimes they would go for like an obvious gag. Most of them were the sexual gags, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I would say more of his sort of banter with the other characters, the a couple X-Men that come in, or the villain, I think were more hit than miss, I would say.
Oh, no. I mean, one of the stronger things about it is, even if there's a patch where the jokes are falling completely and utterly flat, they're rushing to another one that's going to be equally as good. And fortunately, that leads to some payoff. I mean, it does drag, but it never completely got me off the bandwagon.
I did not think it dragged at all. I thought it was fun all the way through. I do agree that there's not a huge story. The villain isn't that great because we don't really get to spend much time with him.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But
I'm okay with how they handled the villain, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, we know enough. I'm not saying he's the perfect villain. It's
Deadpool doesn't really have much of a rogues gallery anyway.
He really doesn't.
So they're kind of limited what they can do, which is why they're going to probably throw other people out of next time.
Well, I just thought they could have maybe spent a little more time with the villain. I mean, there's a couple of scenes, and then because of the structure, it's hit or miss. But then at the end, we have the big fight, and that was kind of it.
But I think the reason they didn't have too much of him in it is because they diffused him too quickly because of Deadpool. It's kind of like the problem with Iron Man, but 10 times worse.
So by virtue of convenience?
Threatening villain. Oh, quip. I'm not afraid of you. Well, then you just the villain's not threatening anymore.
Right.
Like, I'm not afraid of Mickey Rourke.
That could be.
Because Tony's not afraid of him.
Right.
So Deadpool, it's like, you're afraid for like a second, and then I'm going to get you. It's just not. So that's probably why.
All right, well, Joe, what is your grade on Deadpool?
I thought it was a near perfect movie. I'd leave it with an A.
Okay. Just a shade under you with an A-. Excited to watch it again, though. Justin?
B.
All right.
Always on the low end. Ant-Man was real low. All right.
Well, Justin's got to be edgy. He's got to be the harsh one. It's
he does.
Got to be the fighter.
All right. Well, let's see what he thought of Zoolander 2. Justin, you're up first.
No, I think that one might just get a high A.
Definitely. It's been about 15 years since the world saw fashion superstar Derek Zoolander, once again played by Ben Stiller, after his, and I quote, "Center for kids who can't read good and who want to learn to do other stuff went tragically awry." Though when pop stars are being repeatedly assassinated, leaving behind impersonations of Zoolander's trademark look blue steel, Derek is recruited by Fashion Interpol to bring an end to it. Owen Wilson returns as Hansel, as well as newcomer Penelope Cruz to the franchise, and many, many wasted celebrities and cameos. Now, while I was watching this, I was remembering one of the early production bits about Kingsman: The Secret Service, where, ironically enough, also there was a big plot about celebrities being involved and the over-the-top protagonists having to try and save them and other aspects of that. But Matthew Vaughn eventually said this didn't really make much sense, and we got the Kingsman: The Secret Service we know and love today. I really wish Zoolander 2 had taken the same advice, as it seems they quite literally spent more time wondering what the sequel was going to be called than actually making a movie. I'm probably the one who's kind of the most okay with the original of the three of us. It was dumb, but I kind of at least like the complete, utter wackiness of it. Hey, what if a fashion model was completely brainwashed to become an assassin? The plot is kind of funny. But Zoolander 2 just kind of wanders around aimlessly, throwing in whatever random cameo they can find for about half the movie, and then decides, well, we kind of need a story, and it really shows. I don't know, where do you guys stand on that?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of the original. You're right about that. I think it's average. There was a whole stretch of movies like that. I feel the same way about the first Anchorman. It's okay, I get it, but for me, I don't really quite get the cult following.
No, the cult following's out of control. But
and I think Anchorman is probably a better done movie. Certainly more quotable than Zoolander.
Oh, definitely.
Other than Blue Steel, I mean, what really do you have for the first one? You didn't mention Kristen Wiig, who I think
that too
does one of the better jobs in the film. She's only in a few scenes, but she's super like Botoxed up, and I think she's pretty funny in the film. Penelope Cruz actually didn't bother me too much. I usually hate her, but she was okay in this. But you're right, the story isn't that great, and there's way too many cameos for cameo's sake. There's one scene where they're on the balcony, and they go to a few other cameos, and maybe one would have sufficed, instead of 3 or 4. But my big question with this movie was, I don't really know who the audience is, because the references are super dated. There's a bunch, they talk about, Sting plays a part in the film, and there's a bunch of police song references, but they don't even mention some of the big hits. They're talking about there's a Ghost in the Machine. Oh, that album cut from the Police that nobody under the age of 35 probably knows. Okay. And then the finale brings in more cameos, but they're, cameos from the fashion world that are not really relevant to the PG-13 audience that's going to go see this movie.
I was going to say it's stupid comedy.
You've got Mark Jacobs and the woman who Devil Wears Prada is based on, Anna Wintour. And it's that's cool that they're all game to kind of poke fun at their industry, but nobody cares about these people. That's the target audience, I think, for this movie. Yeah. So I think they sort of got a problem of who is going to see this. I think there's some laughs, but not a ton. There were a couple times when I did laugh very hard at a gag. But Joe, you really don't like the original. I know that. Did the second one do anything better for you?
Well, all right. Well, the first Zoolander, it's another one of those instances we know where cult following kind of kills it for me. I'm like, why do so many people like the first movie? I thought it was okay. It was dumb comedy, but I'm like, all right, whatever. This one, I kind of went into it kind of expecting the same thing. I wasn't trying to be as critical of that. Okay, this might not be my thing, but I'm going to judge it as is. And based on my memory, I felt like it was along the same lines of humor. So I wasn't like, this doesn't
I'm the same.
The level of dumb is about the same, so I can't really be that negative there. I think it was just, if I could describe it one way, it was a very weird movie. Because tonally it was all over the place. Because they had all these dumb jokes. And I thought that it was trying really hard to be hip with all the modern references and everything. But then there were like a lot of the plot points, like for character development. In its stupid way, it was advancing the stories from the last movie. Gotta give it credit there. But it was trying to be kind of serious and unpleasant at times. Well, it's not really spoiler.
There's a father-son bonding
that's
moment.
kind of a thing. And Will Ferrell as the villain's kind of more violent than before. Like, so some of it wasn't really necessarily funny. I'm like, I think this is just kind of really dark. So I don't know if tonally, I don't know if that worked or not. I was just like, this is just strange. I did. This is a weird movie, but I was intrigued to see where it was going. Like, okay, this is dumb, but I'm not really bored. I thought there were some funny gags. Like, okay, if you open up with a movie where Justin Bieber lets himself get killed, and then they ask Will Ferrell later, you asked me why I killed him. Okay, that's funny. Like, like, okay, so I can't say that it hit everything negatively. It's just really dumb, not really my thing, and it's definitely uneven. But I don't know. I'm kind of trying to judge it a little less harshly than I would have. To be honest, I think I might enjoy it more than the first movie.
Yeah, wow. I think it's about on par. So, Justin, not for you. It was a big step down for you.
It's a huge step down. I don't want to say they wasted their time, but they wasted their time.
Well, I think they wasted time in coming back 15 years later. I mean, it hasn't worked. Dumb and Dumber 2 was real bad. Anchorman 2 was
some things you just gotta let go.
Yeah, I mean, I get that once there's a cult following, then, the studio's like, okay, well, maybe there's enough people to see this movie, but, like, I don't know, take a movie like Office Space or something.
Office Space 2.
I don't know how Office Space 2... Now, granted, Mike Judge would be behind it, so I would see it, of course. But,
Hank Hill cameo would be great.
But, like, 5 years from now, when it's, 20 years after the fact, how would we feel about that? Aniston's still a waitress at the
we'd be questioning it, like, what happened? Like, the whole point of the movie is then to break out of it.
Right,
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I mean, at the beginning of this, there's sort of a Billy Zane running gag, which was okay.
I was going to ask you about that. How did you feel about that? Because I liked that. Well, I liked that. It was like,
I liked that he was playing
Billy
himself.
Zane. He's like,
and I liked that he became sort of a running gag in the movie.
But this is what I'm talking about. Those kind of scenes, they're like dumb, but the stuff that's happening is kind of serious, and Billy Zane's taking it totally seriously, deadpan, which I liked.
I liked that too. But when you have a Billy Zane playing himself, and you have a Justin Bieber getting murdered at the beginning playing himself, and you have a couple other people, you don't need 1,000 cameos. Like Sting, he played a role, fine.
That was cool.
That was cool.
Like the first one had cameos too, but they at least were nice enough to sort of like spread them out, and the ones that they did keep were really memorable. Everyone knows David Bowie doing the walk off.
Joe, what's your grade on Zoolander 2?
Zoolander 2 is a C-.
Okay, it's a C for me, which is about what I gave the first one. Justin?
F-bomb?
F.
An F?
An F.
Oh, man. Well, I sense a challenge coming up already.
All right, well,
this was not good.
Wow.
Before we leave it.
Yeah, we got to find out.
All right, Dan, you want to inquire? I'm sure, like, what's the thing that really pushes it to an F for you?
I mean, storyline is weak. Basically, it seems to forget everything that made the first one actually kind of entertaining. It never actually commits to anything. It's way too focused on the cameos.
I did think it stuck to the same type of humor, though, from the first one, like Joe mentioned.
Based on my memory, yeah.
Yeah. Now, granted, I haven't seen the first one in a good 10 years.
Me too. So,
I remember it being
probably not
dumb
far off now.
And
I just remember, like, Derek was Zoolander, from what I remember, just really, really dumb.
Yes, but at least there was some degree of like, okay, we know this is a ridiculously stupid premise, but we're gonna go even crazier and have fun with it. This is like, yeah, it's a ridiculously dumb premise, but we'll just bring you back the character and let you deal with him for 40 minutes until we decide what to do with him.
I don't think it's executed incredibly well, but I did get some laughs from it. I can't deny that.
That's kind of why I couldn't really grade it too low, because I kind of found it strangely
I snickered once, and I thought at this exact same time.
There were two laugh out loud moments for me. Obviously, it didn't hit for Justin.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we do have another comedy on the docket, so maybe this one did a little better for you. Joe, you missed out on this one, so it's going to be me and Justin talking about How to Be Single. This is a Sex and the City-esque ensemble film starring Dakota Johnson, Rebel Wilson, Leslie Mann, and Allison Brie. Johnson plays Alice, a woman fresh out of college and a long-term relationship, so she can find herself. Wilson is a wild co-worker at Alice's new paralegal job. Mann is Alice's sister, a doctor who doesn't have time for relationships. And Brie can be lifted out of the film entirely with zero consequence because she's just a single girl who uses a local bar's Wi-Fi to date online and has no real relation to any of the other main characters. I don't really like Alison Brie as an actress in general. I think she's typically unfunny. Her character, though, really, really does add very little to this. It's mainly about the three at the core.
Damn, you've got to see Mad Men sometime, man.
She goes on Mad Men?
I told you this.
I'm sure that's terrible. But look, the characters, as the archetypes I just read, are fairly generic. But it really does garner a lot of laughs, typically from Rebel Wilson, probably doing some improv stuff. And Johnson, I think, is a very good comedic actress. I don't think she's A+, but I did get a lot of laughs from her. I've seen her be funny before in other things. And I do think that the movie throws a couple of curveballs along the way, and not everything is completely expected. Justin, how did this one grab you?
Well, I kind of view it as the anti-Valentine's Day movie, Valentine's Day movie. And I really don't think that's a compliment. I think it more or less wants to be an ensemble movie, but unfortunately falls prey to a lot of the aspects that we're seeing repeatedly in these things. Tacked on side plots, characters who just don't need to be there, and of course, for me, I know not you, Dakota Johnson being Dakota Johnson.
Yeah, you hate her. You hate her like I hate Alison Brie, except, she's at the center of this movie. Alison Brie's sort of off to the side, and you can kind of forget about her.
I was kind of interested to see where Alison Brie's storyline was going, and I was hoping it would eventually sort of work its way into the main storyline.
Yeah, it wasn't horrible.
It just doesn't go anywhere.
It can be lifted out.
Oh, yeah, without question.
And it really doesn't go anywhere. She vaguely sort of has a storyline with the one bartender that Dakota Johnson sleeps with as well. Mm-hmm. But that's about it. That's the thread.
Yeah. Leslie Mann, as per usual for me, great. I think it's probably the majority of the best moments in the entire movie. I don't like the guy she ends up with, but... What
about Rebel Wilson?
Rebel Wilson, I don't understand why they keep doing this, but I feel like...
Because she's hilarious?
I feel like lately she started out being like this actress that they sort of were able to work her in more, and now it's more... I feel like they're just sort of pricking and prodding her for a punchline and hoping she'll say something funny, and it kind of bothers me.
But if it's funny, why does it matter? Obviously, maybe you didn't find it funny.
Because I feel like it's okay, say something funny, Rebel. Well, all right, I'll think of the first relatively funny thing that comes to my head and hope that it works.
No, I think this was one of the, quote-unquote, gag reels that they're going to do on the DVD or whatever. I think Rebel probably fired off about 5 or 6 lines.
I believe it.
And they picked the best one.
I feel like with these kind of movies, you need more of a script. It's better... Improv is okay in bits, but you don't want to make an entire movie based on that. Obviously, it doesn't go the Sisters route, where it literally feels like you're watching half the gag reel while you're watching the movie.
Joe loves Sisters.
It's true.
But I'm sorry, let's be realistic here. There's several scenes in Sisters where it literally feels like you're watching at least 5 minutes from the gag reel.
Well, I admit, it's good to have a solid script for a comedy, but if you have a lot of improv actors that can make it work, that's a lot of Judd Apatow's movies, a lot of improv those, and I like those, so sometimes it works.
It rarely works for Justin, though. He doesn't like the heat as much as we do.
That's true.
For me, this is just one of those movies that I'm sure its heart was in the right place. I'm sure the book was witty. I don't think Dakota Johnson is this new generation Molly Ringwald that everyone's sort of trying to choke her into being, but
including Mr. Grey.
Joker.
Mr. Grey, right?
That was a 50 Shades of Grey reference.
That was good.
Right.
That was
Fun, unintended.
That was good.
Fun, partially intended, but...
Well, it worked for me. It's a B.
D+.
Wow.
Big shocker. All right. Well, next we get to 45 Years, which is nominated for an Oscar, so I sense an A coming from Justin for this. But let's hear about it, Justin.
Actually,
Oh, that's right. You're leading it. That's why you had to watch it. I forgot.
See,
Best show ever.
now I know where he's getting confused. 45 Years is about this married couple who are preparing to celebrate their 45th, obviously, wedding anniversary when they receive some disturbing news in the form of a letter that brings up secrets from the past. And this kind of threatens both parties to question the meaning of their marriage. This is a movie that's kind of difficult to talk about. I think I would say the best way to summarize it is there is beauty in its simplicity. In terms of just how the story is told, it's very, very simple. The structure is very basic. There's a lot of long shots that kind of allow the actors to breathe, let the scenery kind of tell the story, and basically let the main actress, who's getting the nomination,
Charlotte Rampling,
who's really basically the star of this movie and really carries a lot of the scenes of a story that isn't really covering really new ground, but it is trying to tackle a difficult subject in a relatively new way, which I did like. So I think what this movie does best is it does really capture the sense right off the bat that these are two people that have been married a long time, and it really feels like that. But you can also tell right off the bat that there is some subtle issues. There's some complexity under the surface. There's some unhappiness there. And we learn more about what's going on. It's I don't want to give too much away because it seems incredibly realistic for the most part in terms of how the characters deal with the situation. It just seems like real people really questioning the positives and negatives of just a long marriage and the idea of trust and feelings about betrayal and layers of betrayal. So I think that overall it's well done, but I believe it's mostly due to her really good performance. I think.
What about his performance, though?
His performance, I think people aren't talking about as much because maybe the character's a little understated. And for a lot of it, I felt that it was a little imbalanced, to be honest. Like, okay, we're getting so much of her, so much of her.
He's a much more reserved character, I think.
He is reserved, but he plays that well. But he is evoking sadness, which you get right away, even though they seem to be happy. And then you learn more about it, you see why. So it is very well done, too. But they're very different performances because they're very different characters, which I like. But there are a few minor negatives. Well, okay, there's one minor one and one kind of big one, unfortunately. The minor one is it's a short movie, but it does feel like 45 years sometimes. That's because some scenes might go on a little too long, particularly towards the end. There's one final shot they could have ended on, which would have sent the right message across. Okay, seems like it's going to be happy, kind of not. Get it. But then they decide to do a whole other scene, which just kind of beats you over the head, and you think, wait, so it's going to be happy? Oh, no, it's not. So I was like, okay, I get what they were doing, but pick one, not two conclusions there. The big one is a plot hole, which really bothered me because if I hadn't thought about it, this would have been like perfect movie. But it bothered the heck out of me. I'm going to try to say it in an unspoiler way. But you've been married to this guy for 45 years. I can get the fact that he might not have brought this up. But you've had those photographs in the attic for 45 years and you never came across them once and you're a married woman. I don't buy that for a second. I am sorry. Well-written movie, big, gaping plot hole.
Interesting.
So I'm like, that was bad. If I'm picking up on it, that was bad.
Okay.
But besides that...
That's something I didn't think about, but that is an interesting point.
I was going to say,
I'm like, ooh.
Fair observation.
That's bad. But other than that...
Because, especially in a relationship of that generation... She's doing all of the cleaning.
There's no secrets. And then I'm thinking, okay,
right.
There's different houses. He's had these close by and never gone up to. Come on, like I was like, I didn't think about it at first, but as I was driving in the theater, I'm like, oh wait a minute, no way,
that's interesting.
No way. Besides that, I thought it was good. There was some powerful stuff, mostly from her though. I thought that. Yeah. I ththought like the nomination is definitely deserved, but that. Bugged the heck out of me.
After seeing this, I would agree that Jennifer Lawrence is probably the one I would still kick out of the when we did our top 5 snubs.
Hands down.
For me, it was Emily Blunt. Justin, I forget who you put in. I think we all put in somebody for Best Actress.
Charlize Theron, I believe.
Charlize Theron, yeah. And I think we all kicked Jennifer Lawrence out. I would stand by that after now seeing all of the nominees. I do think Rampling does just a fantastic job. One of my issues with it, Joe, actually was a script issue.
Okay.
Or maybe a directing issue, but because of those long shots and because of the stoic nature of the characters, I think we're expected to assume a little bit too much based on her facial expressions of how she feels about something. We never see her talk to a friend about it, or her sister, or anybody else. And all we have to go off is how we would imagine this person may feel about this.
Well, you kind of get it halfway, because there were a couple scenes where she does talk to some friends roughly about the relationship. And she has some reactions.
That's so conversation.
You can enforce
there were a lot
that.
Of long,
that's her character.
She's very reserved. She's not going to confront that. So I kind of got that. I think you know how she feels by the end, Dan.
By the end, yes, but throughout the course of the movie, not really. And that's why I say it is sort of both a scripting and a direction issue, I think. Because you're right, Justin, that is her character, but at the same time, give us a little more than her longing, glance to let us know. She pulls it off, but I would like to know a little bit more of her thought process.
No, that's actually one of the things I thought was one of the bigger strengths of this movie. I thought it was a really nice harmonious balance between characters conveying emotion and the director finding ways to sort of build on that emotion to keep the story going. I do agree it is a little bit stop and go. Sometimes it's really compelling and interesting, and other times we'll have these moments where they just sort of drag on. That may have been with some of the scenery, particularly when they're driving, which happens quite a bit during the movie.
Don't forget the boat.
And the boat, lest we forget. Various forms of transportation. We'll summarize.
So we get from a London village to other English village. So.
But no, I liked the fact that there were these subtleties that we didn't have to know everything. We weren't necessarily seeing these entire segments. We were seeing it in moments, which I really did appreciate.
Well, I didn't like how a couple times they would have a scene where they're having a conversation, and then they would randomly kind of badly cut to another part of the conversation. That was really choppy.
Some of those
editing.
were a little awkward. I'll give you that.
I was like, the editing on some of those was just glaringly obvious. I don't know if that was intentional, but I was like that. Okay, so we'll be in the middle of a conversation, and I guess jump to this other part of the conversation. I don't know. It was just some of those were a little awkward.
All right, well, Joe, what would you give 45 years?
I would give it an A-.
I'm with you, A-. Justin?
Lo and behold, A-.
Okay.
Oh, not an A+?
No. Oh, come on.
Well, you never know.
Yeah. Flaws are flaws.
Yeah, that's a few.
I do still like a more better, if we're going to talk about long-term elderly couple movies that the Academy, lavishes nominations to. I do prefer a more, but certainly different stories.
Without question.
But they both are sort of in the vein of what Joe has referred to on the show as just life. I mean, there's nobody really to blame here. For him, it was sort of
longing, I guess.
Yeah, like longing, missed opportunity / kind of thing. A more obviously it was sickness, but
I don't know. I think it's one of those things. What's interesting actually is it obviously kind of speaks to the complexity of the story and how it's reflecting human situations. Is that at the beginning of the movie, I did not like the husband. I just didn't like him. But the more you learn about him, it's kind of reversed, and I'm kind of like, give him a break.
Yeah, you almost have some sympathy in a way.
Give him a little bit of a break, lady. I mean, come on,
And this is, the way that that generation would have been back then. Like, that part makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense why she'd feel that way. But, even so, I'm like, I could see both sides for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to do it for the show this week. We've got tons up in the minisode department. We have our Oscars So White minisode for February, Black History Month, taking a look at 4 different films that garnered an acting win, I should say, to either an actor or an actress of African American descent. Also, we've got the Top 20 Redo / Oscar Predictions minisode. That is up. The Star Trek review shows are up, so lots of things to check out, and we will, of course, see you back here next week with another new show. And you can check us out on Facebook, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter feed @Film Fanatics Pod. We will see you back here next time. Thanks for listening. Hail Hydra.